Hello, everyone. Welcome to Together with Heather. Today we have an awesome show. We'll be doing our education corner as always. And then we'll be talking about line 3. As some of you maybe know, the last 2 Sundays, I've taken some trips out there. I think it's really important that we take the opportunity to just listen and learn about what's going on. And so I have some guests with us today to talk about that. And then I also went out there with some of our representative elects. It was important to me that we don't just kind of sit back and listen from afar. I think we always learn more when we actually go and see and witness and feel the energy that's out there. It helps us make more clear decisions and also see what that bigger vision is. A lot of us ran our campaigns on being kind to Mother Earth, being energy efficient, and really working towards a more just environment. So with that, I want to get started. As always, we do an education corner, and I have Sankees back with me today from NDSU. Hello, Sankees.
Hello, Heather. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, it's kind of fun, right? So, what were you going to say?
Nothing. I was going to say it's a blast. I'm looking forward to this conversation tonight.
All right. So the topic that we're going to talk about, because we just had students going through finals, it was the first full semester that we were in pandemic mode. So school looked very different. And it's really important to have a support system around students who are currently in school because they're becoming home for holiday break and they might feel that academic exhaustion. It's been really difficult for a lot of us. That what do you feel is like the importance of having a good support system to encourage our students to come back next semester and really re-engage in the education system, for that long-term goal of earning their degree?
Yeah, Heather, in any year, I would say it's absolutely critical that we as college professionals, whether we're in advising or admission or faculty, that we're checking in with our students, pandemic or not. I think this year more than ever, there's just another layer of stress that students are dealing with. They're not only trying to pass their classes, but they're trying to pass them in a very different classroom environment. A lot of the students, specifically at NDSU, are doing instruction remotely. So adjusting to an online format adds stress. Maybe taking classes from your bedroom or from your dorm room adds stress. You're not in a full professional classroom setting. And so it's so critical that we as the campus community, faculty and staff are just checking in with our students, not to get them to complete things, but also just to make sure they're okay and to be flexible. I think the cliche words of the year have been flexibility, adaptability, perseverance, but those are so true for our students. And we just have to go above and beyond to make sure that they're okay, like as humans, not just in the classroom.
That's so true. And I think for our families too, like our families, parents, guardians, siblings, like I think we all know somebody who's in school right now, whether it's high school, whether it's college, whether it's going to school for their masters, like everybody is just really stressed out about a lot of things. I know a lot of people who are going to school while they're homeschooling their kids, and that wasn't part of the plan. And so I think even beyond just our university, staff and faculty, it's really like the people who are at home. So I think the biggest message that I really want to share is that for each of you who are listening, check in with those people who are in school. It has been really, really hard. And like Sankees said, it's not about how did you do in class? Like what grades did you get? It's like, are you doing okay? Like we talk a lot about holistic care with students, that we have to make sure that their mental health, physical health, spiritual, emotional are all in line. And that's how they really do a good job. Sankees, do you have any stories about like a really difficult time when you were in school that like that support system played a powerful role in your life?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'm trying to think back to, I can think back to my college days. I don't think I can think way back to my high school days, but I remember it was the flood of 2009, was it? Oh gosh, I don't remember the year. I was up at UND and classes were canceled. We all had to come together and sandbag. We still had assignments to do. We still had tests to take. But we also had this obligation and desire to serve our community. So not only was I trying to do well in my classes, I was also trying to make sure my community was safe. My grandfather is someone who's checked in with me regularly and has been a huge advocate for me in education. And so the fact that he just reached out and sent me like little cards and money sometimes, because money is important when you're a broke college student, but he really went the extra mile and just made sure I was okay, because he knew I was juggling a lot. And that was a stressful time to not know like if you were going to have a place to go sleep at, knowing that the water levels were rising so quickly. And I didn't know if we'd have a town that year. So that was tough. I'm sure I could think of many more examples if you didn't put me on the spot, but that's one that comes to mind.
It wouldn't be fun if I didn't put you on the spot,
Yeah.
right? And at least we know they're genuine answers. I kind of think of the same thing. Like my, when I was in school for my associate's degree, I was really struggling. And I remember my dad just always calling and checking on, and it was never about school. It was just always about like the human in the piece of it, and just making sure that, you know, I was okay. I think also it's an okay message of support to say, if you need a break, that's okay. But like, if you're going to take a break, how can I encourage you when you're ready to go back? Because I'll tell you from experience, like taking a break from school, it does create a harder traction to get back into the cycle of school. But really, support looks different to everybody. Lastly, you know, we work with a lot of transfer students. And so we're going into, you know, almost a year of pandemic. People have lost jobs. People are reevaluating what kind of professions they want to go into. And often, you know, if you're in your 30s or 40s, school can be really scary to go back, like to think about going back to college for something. What are some tips that you have for people in a support network to support and encourage people that are considered quote unquote older than average, you know, to go back to school?
Yeah, the first thing this is a quote I live by, is learning is lifelong. There's never an end date or an expiration date on learning. So, and knowledge is power, of course. And so if it were me working with a student who was older than average or non-traditional, if you will, really helping them get over some of those assumptions or generalizations about college. I think sometimes there's a lot of intimidation of sitting in a classroom with people that may be younger than them. So coaching and talking through folks about how they can really contribute to that conversation and be an asset for other people. So not only are they able to learn, but they're also able to influence other people's learning. We know that when you are able to learn in a diverse environment, whether that's diversity of age or race, background, it helps you long term. So helping non-traditional or older than average students just really get over some of those assumptions, or some of like maybe them being the minority, and coaching them through like, what does that look like and how can you overcome that and really make the most of your experience in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I went back for my bachelor's in my 30s, and it was the scariest thing I ever did, because like walking into a classroom just around a bunch of 18, 19-year-olds, and like they just live different. You know, they're on different paths and they're doing different things. And I'm like here with my backpack and pencil and paper, like ready to take notes. But I also learned that like as an older than average student, it was people in my life professionally that created this support system for me to go back to school. So I think it's important. I just wanted to highlight the support system and the importance of that when it comes to school, especially as we're going to be maybe spending some time with our students and people who maybe are looking for a shift in a career. Is there anything else you want to add quickly before we wrap up our education corner?
Yeah, one thing that I thought of as you were talking about your experience returning to school, one of the best classes I took was a class where there were older than average students in the class. It was a women in religion course, and there was an older lady who returned back to get her degree. And she just opened up my mind, like just to learn from other people who've lived their life is just so valuable. You can't get that from a textbook or from a lecture. And so yeah, just hearing your story, Heather, really made me think back to that class and just how memorable it was and how much I've really like taken from that course. Like there's not much you really take from classes, carry with you. So yeah, thanks for reminding me about that.
Yeah, professors told me that they actually really like grown students because we have life experiences and we often bring a new perspective in. So, well, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We'll always have more conversations. But this is wrapping it up for our Education Corner today on the importance of how to be supportive for our students, either going to college or thinking about going back to school. As always, it's fun to have our Director of Admission from NDSU join us. And so we're going to shift into another conversation. As many of you know, and if you don't know, now is an opportunity to learn about Line 3. It's taking place in multiple areas in our beautiful North Minnesota, but there's some major concerns with it. And today we're going to talk, honestly, we're going to talk about the experiences that we've had as we've gone out and actually have spent time in the spaces. And so I want to bring on Winona, if she is on. Winona LaDuke has been doing a lot of work around Line 3 for years. And I think it's really important for us to follow the people who've been doing the work in the communities and the people who we, feel are our elders and our leaders. And so welcome, Winona. I know that you're just doing so much work, and the last couple times I've been out to see you, I just wish that we could do more. But do you want to do just a quick overview of kind of where we are this week in Line 3, and then I'm going to bring on the other legislators who joined us, and we'll kind of have a further conversation with that.
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry you can't see me. When somebody young comes and visits me, maybe they can fix that. Anyway, so it's the state of Minnesota, the Department of Commerce, the tribes all filed suit in August to say we need to look at the route, that EIS is not up to par. Don't know what to do with the spill. Don't know how to cross these waters, and there's deep environmental, including climate change concerns, and that and the certificate of need, which is like how you get the right to condemn people's land, is something called a certificate of need. And that certificate of need says that Enbridge really needs this. And that was all approved. And we filed suit in August, and we won our day in court. And the Court of Appeals of Minnesota is supposed to hear our case, the state's case, Department of Commerce, and the tribes. And right now, Enbridge is just trying to get the pipeline done before we even get to court. So you go up there, and they're tearing apart the North Country. And a quick December 1st, they started, and they've just been rolling through the North Country and taking down trees with this buncher feller and digging these big holes in the ground and trying to get underneath the Mississippi, the Shell, the Crow Wing, the Red River, the Little Red River, the Tamarack River, the Willow River. It's really, really, really violent and scary. And I think we had 30 people arrested so far. These are like good people that just don't want a fossil fuels pipeline in Minnesota, another one, the 7th.
Yeah. Well, and I think in some of the stuff that I've read as I've been learning, it's supposed to cross through like 227 bodies of water. And some of that is like the rivers, the lakes, but also, some of our ricing areas. And I think so far they've damaged 7 or 8 that are like, we're not going to be able to bring those back. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mess that's being made, and it's really tragic that the mess is being made, here, just for this Canadian corporation. I mean, I'm just trying to point out that we're at the end of the fossil fuel cars. We've been driving around in cars that are 16% efficient, a combustion engine. An electric engine is 65% efficient. Everybody's going to electric engines, and we don't even use that much oil. And we don't need a brand new oil pipeline through the middle of Minnesota that is going to break. The Keystone XL broke within just a few months of its operation. Those pipes have been out there sitting around, getting turned over and repainted for years. So I'm just sitting here saying, what a lot of other Minnesotans are saying is, why are you doing this, Governor Walz? Why are you doing this? It's the end of the fossil fuel era. It's a Canadian corporation that all this got given to. And what we really want is leadership. What we really want is jobs that are going to make a difference for our communities over the long haul. What we really want is jobs that don't cause conflict and hatred. What we really want is renewable energy and local foods and not more pollution. And, that's what we want governor to do. But, we're looking at, I've been very afraid and frustrated, and you were out there. It's not nice. And they are, it's scary out there. The DNR is very aggressive with us. It's the Department of Natural Resources. And I feel like that's my Department of Natural Resources. This is my water I want protected. It's just sad.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, there's this misconception that like fighting for clean water is an Indigenous issue. And the reality is all of us are connected to water in some capacity. Like this is an everybody issue. This is something that so many other people really should care about and do care about. And so I want to bring some of those people on screen with us. Winona, these are a lot of the legislators who came out with us last weekend. And so I just kind of want to walk through. I think a lot of us have learned a lot from you, from the experience of being out there. There's a lot that after you get home and you really think about things, that maybe there's some more questions or follow-up questions. So do we have any other legislators on? Here. Are they coming? Yes. Well, hey, Mary. Hey, Jess. And Liz. So Mary is going to kind of help co-host this conversation. Mary's been really working on it for a while. I mean, longer than probably any of us. And so Mary is currently in the House of Representatives, but recently elected into the Senate. And so the work that she's been doing, we really hope carries over into that capacity. So Mary, do you want to say a couple words and then we'll start some conversations? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me here. If I drop off, I'm having a lot of internet issues today. This line 3 has been a thorn in our side now for, 7-8 years. I'm not sure exactly when it first began, but when I was elected into the House of Representatives 4 years ago, we did a lot of resistance. We pushed back a lot. And of course, that was at the time of just the DAPL over on Standing Rock. And my family is from Standing Rock. I saw the damage done, not just to the lands, but the post damage to the community, to the environment, to the economics of that area. And visiting with Winona and her water warriors up there a couple of times now, it's sort of a PTSD reaction, because we see once again the destruction of beautiful Mother Earth, the lack of compassion or concern for the damage done. And, it's just very disappointing that at a time in Minnesota where we are dealing with, some of the highest numbers of COVID, especially in that area, that there would be hundreds of thousands of men coming in and making the area just so unsafe. And of course, there was a death just this past week by one of the employees by one of the large machines. And there's so many things that are pointing to that this is not a good project. This is not a good action to be taking right now. And I do wish that those who could make the decisions would make the right decision, the good decision, and reverse some of the actions that are being done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that part of it is that as leaders, we just want to learn. And so I'm going to go, hang on, I think somebody needs to mute themselves. So I want to go through, we have 4 rep-elects here. And if I've said it before, I'll say it 1,000 times that I am so excited to be part of this incoming class. I worked fairly closely with all 4 of these. Now rep-elects, we're not candidates anymore. It's hard to like transition that mind frame, but we worked really hard together on the campaign trail, and this is one thing that we talked about, not line 3 in specific, but like that we want to invest in protecting Mother Earth, and we want to be able to work towards an energy efficient Minnesota, and we're not trying to take away jobs. We just want to have environmentally friendly jobs. And like, I think Winona says it so well, like we don't want jobs that are creating this huge issue. And so I'm going to go down and just kind of ask each of you to give a little bit of a reflection. I think we all kind of knew that line 3 was happening, but all of you showed up. And if you have a takeaway, if you have maybe a follow-up question for Winona, we'll talk about that. But the first person I want to go to is Rep-elect Liz Bolden. So she actually came out 2 weekends. So she came the weekend that we were out with a lot of the senators, and then she came again last weekend. And so, Liz, do you want to talk about some reflections that you have and just even the change in 1 week from what we saw? I mean, it's crazy how fast things are moving, right?
Yeah, it was crazy to just see the difference. And so thank you, Heather, for having me on and being part of this important conversation. It was really eye-opening to me. And so, it's different to hear about it, just, partially maybe in the media or just to hear people talking about it, but to see it is something really different. And that's really why I wanted to go, to just have that connection and to see it with my own eyes and hear from people who are doing this work and those water warriors who are, protecting that land and doing that work, and just to see really for myself. It's beautiful land up there. So we were up by Palisade. It's gorgeous. And it was surprising to me, although it probably shouldn't have been, I guess, but the difference just in a week, in 7 days, Winona used the word, violent, that it's, just the destruction is violent. And it's true. Just seeing, and when we were there, the work wasn't actively happening, but to see the difference, just the trees that are just gone, was really sort of amazing. So, I think as I reflect, it's important, like I said, for me to listen and, take, to use my, now in this role as a representative elect, to use my voice and my privilege and power to, speak for justice and fairness. And there's a lot of reasons why there's concerns around this, many of which have been touched on. Not the least of which is just the safety, for one, the safety of the workers, as was mentioned, just with the quickness of the speed of the work that this is being done. There's safety concerns there, but also we are in a pandemic. And so bringing in numbers of workers from across the country, that just is not a safe thing to be doing right now. And so we, in Minnesota, we've been working hard to put sort of guidelines in place to keep all of us safe. And so I want to keep on that path and be sure that we're doing that. And so another thing that really resonated with me, Heather, is, as you said, I think sometimes the talk around this is that it's an Indigenous issue, but it isn't. It's, this does affect all of us. And so I think that's, another part of the reason that it's important to me to, this is an issue that affects everybody. And so to speak up in that way. And one question maybe I would have in reflecting on it and thinking back to, the number of folks that we're bringing in to the area, which causes safety concerns, is how many people is this? Because as we talk about jobs, it's not all these jobs aren't Minnesotans, it's people coming from other areas. And so how many do we know how many people that is?
I think that'd be a good question to ask. I mean, when you're up there, this was represented as kind of a Minnesota jobs project. And, but we don't have 4,200 union pipe workers. Those people are largely from out of state. There's Texas plates, there's Utah plates, there's Wyoming plates. The individual who was killed was an out of state contractor. And the company is working really fast, trying to like really get everything done before they get stopped in court. And, so in that, it's super dangerous. And the numbers, are out there. And, one of the things that I've pointed out and asked the legislators that I think is fair to ask the state, I mean, the PUC issued these contracts. They, one, don't have a compliance way. We don't have a way to see if Enbridge is complying. And when they don't comply, who's in charge of enforcing it? Two, who's in charge of like all of this out of state, the security guards that we don't know about, the equipment that Enbridge dropped off to local police stations, the accounting for how many out of state contractors there are. Who's in charge of that? This is a giveaway of public lands. It's a giveaway of public lands. And so we, the public, have a right to know like how this all rolls out. It's a real big question of, it's about the environment, but it's about how the future is made too. And how we should be. But yeah, I don't know, these are the questions that I think that we should have answers to. Some of them.
Yeah. And I think, Mary, if you want to follow up a little bit too about, you were talking about that some of the workers that are local aren't part of unions. I mean, they're contracted workers, and so they don't have access to healthcare. We don't have, these other things that come along with being part of a union. Mary, do you want to touch on that just quickly?
Sure. I had a phone call about a week ago from a person from up north, and he is working on the pipeline because it's a job that he can get over the holidays. But the fact is that he's found out that he's ill, and there's no insurance been offered, because what Enbridge has done is contracted with whatever state that they're working with, where they can find workers, and then consider all of these employees independent contractors, which means they don't have to offer them health insurance, they don't have to offer them any benefits. And I think this is a real concern, again, for Minnesota and our responsibility towards these workers to ensure that they have access to good health care if they are ill or are injured, that Minnesota is not now picking up the tab for Enbridge because they won't make that part of the package. And, when you are a union member, they fight for you. They ensure that you have all of these rights and protections, a safe workplace, that your hours are reasonable, that you have benefits for you and your family. And that obviously is not being followed in this instance. And it feels to me just another example of how Enbridge is not being a good steward, not only to our community, to our environment, but also to those that they have employed to do this work.
So I'm going to take a quick detour. Look who I have with me. Yay. One thing that I talked about, and I've always talked about, is activism is something that I've been doing for a very, very long time. And I love when my son wants to get involved in these things with us. And so he actually came out with me and was right alongside with all of you. So if it's okay with everybody, I'm going to plop in the youth quick. And I just want, DJ, share your perspective as like a kid who's growing up and kind of seeing this, and this kind of being the first kind of visual that you've seen in some of this destruction. What was your thoughts? What did you think when you went out there this weekend?
I thought it was a good experience. I thought it was like it was crazy because I never thought that like that was actually I knew it was going on, but it was different seeing it like in person and being there and like seeing how people act when something comes along,
Mm-hmm.
and it really surprised me. So
Yeah. So you learn so much by going and seeing.
yeah.
Do you have a question for Winona? You remember Winona?
Yeah.
She's on the call. Do you have a question or anything you want to say to her?
I want to ask, like, when did you like start knowing that you wanted to make change and like wanted to make difference? Like, was like how old were you, or like what's like a big thing that happened just growing up?
That was a good question.
That's a cool question. I come from a good family. My parents were in the civil rights movement. I was born in East LA and I hung with the farm workers. So I come from, and my grandma was a union pocketbook maker. I come from people who think you should stand up and do the right thing. And I'm proud of all them, and I'm proud of all the people I'm privileged to get to know, So I kind of like had a sense, probably just like you know what's right, you know what's wrong, and the question is what you do with it. So you do your best. That's what I figure. But started pretty young, and then when I went off to college is kind of when all these things happen at the same time. That's what happens sometimes. You get out of your little small town and you're like, holy buckets. Look at those people doing all that stuff. But come back to Palisade and see us, but change is made by people like you and me. That's how change is made,
Cool. That was a good question. See, the youth always brings the other questions. I think it's weird because I don't know that any of us we're one day just woke up and said, you know what? I think I'm going to be an activist. I think we've just been engaged, we have a different passion. So I'm going to roll over to Rep-elect Jess Hansen because she also brought her kids along. And so, Jess, do you want to give us a little bit of a recap of what you thought from it, and then ask Winona or Mary any questions or follow-up thoughts that you have from this visit?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on tonight. And thank you again for extending the invitation to me as well. I just think it was so important to go and bear witness to what was happening. I've felt connected to protecting our lands and making sure Minnesota stays as beautiful as it is supposed to be since I was a child. And so making sure that I could bring my kids in on that, they had the choice to stay home and they chose to come with. And so I think that is reflective of what the next generation is looking for. Not only are there a whole bunch of grown-ups who expect that we continue to keep Minnesota, like I said, the beautiful place it is, the kids expect that too. They expect us to be making decisions that are going to be beneficial for their future. I know a friend, her kid said, about, are you afraid of what the future holds? And her kid said, no, because I know there's grown-ups like you watching out for us. And I think it's incumbent on us as parents, as adults and role models and mentors, aunts, uncles, grandparents, cousins, whatever role you play in youth's lives, that we remember who we're going to fight for, who we're leaving this problem to. And I think the biggest influence for me has been Winona's work. I've read everything she's written. It has informed my position about how we fight for environmental justice, economic justice, and how we make sure that we keep Minnesota beautiful. So it was hard to see the devastation. I was there just the 1 week. I do plan to come back. But I'm downriver. I live in a river city down in the South Metro, and that's the community that I represent. And so for me, it was just so clear that we all have a stake in this. We all have to do what it takes to make sure that the laws are being followed. I know a lot of the rhetoric is that, this is a legal process and it's going through the legal process. But like Winona said, who's enforcing this? And I think those are questions that the public needs to continue to pose to everybody in positions of power so that we know that the laws are actually being followed. And I suspect that as we continue to poke and prod around that, we find some holes. And I'm also concerned about the ways that, you know, law enforcement approaches folks when they are bearing witness to this. There's a continued conversation happening about what that looks like in communities around the state. And I don't think North Country is any different. And so I think that is another piece of this, is that from my perspective, we pay conservation officers to protect our forest, not to protect what may be something that shouldn't be happening. And so I'd be interested to see what their role is in this and what they plan to do to help protect our lands. I don't have any questions for Winona right now, except for I do want to just say thank you, because there are lots of us watching the work you're doing, Mary as well. We're coming behind you. You've held the door open for folks to learn more and to get involved and to have the tools that we need to continue to use our voices to make the change we want to see in the world. So I'm humbled to get the opportunity to learn from you and to just be alongside of you and protect our waters as best we can.
I think we all second, third, fourth, fifth that sentiment in the work that you've done, Winona. I want to move over to Rep-elect Cedric Frazier. He is actually out in beautiful North Minnesota right now. But let's talk a little bit about what you learned out there. I think, too, one thing, I don't have a legal mind. Like, that's not my education. That's not my realm. But I think some of the questions that you were asking and some of the knowledge that you were gaining is around the system, like the legal system with all of this. So give us a little bit of an update on what you learned, what your feelings were out there, and any questions, comments you have for Winona.
Yeah, so I mean, just quickly, I think that, Winona, thank you for engaging us when we came out and taking us around. And Heather, again, I appreciate the fact that you organized this for us, because I think it's very important for us to be in those communities with the community that's being impacted and hear those stories and hear those voices so we can amplify them. Being out there, as you said, I'm out here now. I'm in the Reamer, Loneville area right now, which is just not far from where things are happening over in Palisades. And so for me, this area is not new to me. The beauty, the serenity is not new to me. What it means to the entire state is not new to me. In fact, when I was campaigning, my district I represent is in the northwest suburbs, but when I was campaigning, there were signs in my constituents' yards, stop line 3. So again, it is not this greater Minnesota or rural versus urban issue. This is an issue that absolutely impacts the entire state of Minnesota. And when we talk about the environmental piece, it impacts the entire region that we sit in, right? And I always see we are stewards of this land for the next generation. Kind of going back to what Jess said, we're the adults, but we're the stewards of this land for the next generation, and we have to make sure. In fact, I made a promise that I would help to protect as much as I could. I want to ensure that what I am enjoying today, what my kids are enjoying today, that their kids and their kids' kids will be able to enjoy the same thing. And so that is a promise I plan to keep. And that is a promise that I will continue to abide by and be governed by when I'm here to represent and amplify the voices. The legal pieces, I mean, I think some of the things that we heard, and one of the big pieces that I'm concerned about is, I'll just say, is the safe work environment for our workers. I am absolutely concerned to hear that they're mostly working with, contracted labor to avoid putting benefits in place, medical benefits or any other type of labor agreement benefits to help protect those workers. I think it's a way to skirt your responsibilities. It's also a way. They're moving so fast. This is how they're moving so fast, because what Mary mentioned earlier, if you had organized unions in place, they would stand up and put a stop to this if the working environment was not safe for their workers. They would push back. They would organize and unite it and a united front, they would push back against the employer to do the right thing. And so I know they know that. I know that they know that this will slow their process and what they're trying to do. So that is a huge concern to me. And this was pitched as jobs for Minnesotans. This is a good thing for Minnesotans to have jobs. And it's very concerning, and it's a red flag for me if you've got folks coming in from out of state that are not Minnesotans and are not in organized groups that are working these jobs, because that tells me that was disingenuous. It was absolutely not. This is absolutely not a good thing for Minnesota, environmental wise and workers wise. So I have absolutely have issues with that. I know we continue to talk about the fact that it's now going through the legal process, and that's where it is. But I absolutely disagree that we don't still have a role to play in this, that we can continue to amplify this issue. We can continue to talk about how we can help protect our environment and protect our workers and protect the community members that are in this area. So that's very important to me. The question that I would have for Winona is just to let us know how we can be supportive, how we can be helpful, how we can continue to amplify this issue, and anything we can do to help support the mission that you are trying to execute here.
Hey, I just want to thank you all again for following this and watching it, because I do know that everybody's got a lot going on in our state. We get that, but this is really fundamentally also central to our state. It's like, do we value our water or not? I feel like, I'm not a criminal. I'm a water protector. I feel like everybody should be a water protector. And this is the only, we have water here, and it is life. Water is life. So to me, it's kind of like a Minnesota thing. I feel like Minnesotans are water protectors. You don't get 10,000 lakes and go hang out there without feeling like you're one with the water. So I'm like, stand up, Minnesota. Be there for your water. And I think people are doing that. I mean, people are dropping off cookies, dropping us $40, coming in with I never had so much good food in my darn life. We're getting so much food donated up there, so thank you for supporting us. Second, I want to say that, what we really need is a stay. That's to say, Enbridge, take a chill. Just take a little bit of a chill. This big rush, that's how people get killed. That was a union worker. They had a work stoppage after that. But just to tell you, to be clear, in Canada, there's a similarly aggressive pipeline proposal, Trans Mountain. They had 2 worker deaths in October, and they had another injury, and they closed their operation down to the beginning of the new year. I'm just saying, rush these projects, you're going to get more people killed. You're going to run over more things and violate more laws. And finally, I want to say, look, if the court said that we have a reason to be in court, if they build the whole darn pipeline before we even get to our day in court, is that really fair, Governor? Is that really fair? This is not fair to the people of Minnesota. It's not fair to the Ojibways. And to be honest, if we want to talk about, not only climate change, but about being a state that isn't racist, this is racist. This pipeline is racist. Its targets, specifically, it sacrifices Indian people for a Canadian multinational and 23 jobs at the end of the pipe. That's short-sighted thinking, and it's wrong. But what we want is a stay. We want the governor to say, just take a chill. We're going to hear this case in court so that it means something, that the court system and the system actually means something. Anyway, I can't thank you guys enough for coming up. I'm sorry you can't see me, but I'm kind of moving my hands around in a very happy manner.
I think it's really important to highlight the fact that this whole idea of not in my backyard is a thing that's real, and it's happening. People in St. Paul don't want a pipeline through their, lakes and beautiful parks and stuff, but they're okay with it if it's not in their backyard. And what that tends to be is out in our backyards then, and why is that fair? And why is that not there? And why aren't we working closer with our tribal nations and understanding our treaties? I see Nancy on here. Nancy talks a lot about treaty responsibilities are to be good stewards to the land, period. And that's a two-way agreement. And so let's move on. I want to go to Athena. Athena was out. She was there. Give us some of your recap. And then any questions that you might have for Mary, who's been working on this for quite a while, or Winona.
Sure. Thanks for having me, as everybody already said. My experience, for me, like, I've always been against Line 3. Like, I campaigned on it. I talked to my constituents about it. A lot of folks in St. Paul in my district are adamantly against Line 3. And so I feel like I knew a lot of the logical reasons behind why I was against it, but it was important for me to go to the site to feel grounded in the land and the water and like the reality of what this means. Because I think it was easy to read about it and understand it intellectually, but it was important for me to really feel that connection with the earth. And so I'm really thankful that I had the chance to do that. And it did impact me in some really profound ways. To the point that you were making previously, Heather, that about the legality of this situation, I just want to follow up on what Cedric was saying and point out that some laws just suck, right? Like, even if you're following the law to a T and you're following the process to a T, sometimes those are just bad laws. And we know this is true. And I think this is a perfect example of that situation, which is why it's so important that legislators are going up there, because even if every person in this situation is doing everything right, all right, and following the letter of the law, the reality is the impact that it has on the community, on the earth, on Minnesota in general is not correct, right? Like, this is not something that in general Minnesotans agree with and want to see happen. And so that means we need to change the process. We need to change the laws. We need to figure out how to make sure that this doesn't happen. And I think that is really, it's incumbent upon us as lawmakers to work towards this. So, to me, it makes a ton of sense to continue to push legislation or to continue to push legislators to go to Palisade, to see what this is, to learn more about it, because ultimately, if we don't stop this one, like, what kind of precedent does that set? Do we want to be looking in the future to see this happening again or in a different way that is equally destructive? I think it's really important that we think about what sort of precedent this is setting and how we either want to change and interrupt what's happening right now, or how we want to change it so that it can't happen in the future. And I've heard a lot of people talk to me about, well, this is a job creation and it's so important for these individuals to have jobs. And what I have frequently told folks, which is, I think, a bit of a controversial statement, but there's lots of things that create jobs that we're not in favor of. Like, that somewhere along the line, back in the 40s and 50s, there was somebody who was arguing against desegregation because they got more money to put in 2 water fountains instead of 1, right? For the colored folks and the white folks. Somebody was like, no, this is going to cut into my bottom line. But the reality is that's not right, and it's not fair, and that's not the world that we want to live in. And so I understand that we're concerned about the well-being of Minnesotans and their ability to, live their lives and make money. That is important. We live in a capitalist society, for better or for worse. But there are other ways that we can support them and create jobs that are friendly to the earth, that are friendly to other Minnesotans, that are forward thinking, that are not short-term jobs and contract jobs, but that are things that are well paying, that have benefits, and that, that individuals can really live with and build a career around. And that's what I would like to see done for these folks and done with these folks, to understand how we can build a better Minnesota proactively instead of just reacting to every time a corporation says, hey, we want to do this here. So sorry, that's my spiel. I don't think I have any particular questions. But I think this is such an important issue, and I absolutely cannot allow it to fade away. I've heard from so many people saying, well, it's a done deal. And I'm like, that's not acceptable. That's not acceptable. Like, I don't accept that it's a done deal. We have to keep pushing forward. And, if it ends up just being the group of freshman legislators coming in and pushing this forward, then that's the way it's going to be. But I really want to thank you, Winona, for taking the time to show us around, to explain everything, to answer all of our probably really boring and repetitive questions. But we just really wanted to get a handle on how this was impacting folks and what we can do to help. So thank you, Winona and Heather, for all of the work you're doing, and Mary, for that matter.
Yeah, thanks again for coming up.
If I may make a statement. Go ahead, Winona.
I just want to thank everybody again for coming up and just, again, just point out that it's kind of emblematic of the problem. Enbridge is the single largest energy consumer in the state of Minnesota. Should I say that one more time? Enbridge is the single largest energy consumer in the state of Minnesota. Their whole line in the United States and Canada is the equivalent of 2 nuclear power plants. My question is, what do you want to do, Minnesota? You want to produce energy to move tar sand sludge across your water, or do you want to transition to a better economy where we have renewable energy and local food, and we don't make everything overseas? We make it in Minnesota, and we're proud of it, and we have a lot of hemp. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Let's just do cool stuff and leave this last century stuff last century. Sorry.
And I would like to respond to Athena's comments about legislators. And I'm so thankful and so encouraged by the caliber of the representatives, the state representatives that are going to be joining the House in January. When I was elected 4 years ago to the House of Representatives, we were elected in an incredibly dynamic group of new state legislators with a lot of energy and goals and things that we hope to be able to create for the good of Minnesota. As a state legislator, we are tasked with keeping our constituents and our state safe. And this line 3 does not fall under keeping our economy safe, our environment safe, and our people safe, which, just makes common sense that we would not be supporting it. But Minnesota is changing. I think our representatives, both in the House and the Senate, are becoming more energized and not sitting back. A lot of the work that we do as legislators is educating each other within the two bodies, and it's also educating the public. And once you know, you can always use an excuse. I didn't know. I couldn't do anything. I didn't know. But once you know, you are morally and you are responsible for making positive change for all of Minnesota, not just your own district or your own constituency. And so I'm really excited and I'm really encouraged by these very active new representatives that are coming in. And I'm really excited to take what I learned from the House and move it over to the Senate as well, because, a lot of the work we do is not just creating new bills, not just amending old bills.
We might have lost her. She's still talking up there, but I can't hear her. Is she muted? Mary, are you muted? I don't know. She was saying I don't know. We're going to move on. Sorry, Mary. I think she's out somewhere. But talking about being ignited and having like a really fun new group. I want to bring on Recolect Kayla. I know you're in the middle of flying and I feel like we're catching you on and off planes in your job, but you talk a lot about actually like the support that you've given unions and the work behind that. And like, what did you learn? And from your experience in Mindframe, like, I believe that we can make a transition in jobs. You know, I work in higher ed. New majors that we talk about are environmental engineering. You know, how do we help the transition of our workers into a new field rather than keeping them stuck in where we're at? Like, what's some of that feedback that you have? I think you're muted.
Oh, it's my first day. First of all, I just want to say thank you for inviting our group to come up and share in community. It was incredibly moving and transformative. I had quite a moment praying by the river and just seeing the hard work and the heart and emotion and love behind this work. In terms of what does this look like for union workers, first of all, the narrative that jobs and the environment are mutually exclusive is not only false, but it's intentional. And like you said, there's ways to battle that. I did do a little research. There are some Minnesota workers on this project, and the problem with sort of these types of jobs is they are always temporary. Building trades jobs are always temporary because once something is built, they're on to the next project. And it's the union's job to make sure their members always have work. And that's what I would want my union to do. My union is fighting for that right now as we're facing the consequences of this pandemic in the airline industry. That being said, I loved how Winona talked about there are all sorts of pipelines that workers can work on in terms of like wastewater and other infrastructure projects. And so I think we have a really unique opportunity to talk about this as legislators, me with my labor experience and my environmental experience. I've worked at this intersection before. And I was reminded of my travels in Central and South America, where we saw these huge mining corporations or these huge pipeline corporations come through and just steal the land from the Afro-Colombians, from the indigenous communities, leaving folks that had never lived in a city, that had always lived on the land, and that was their whole life. They just took the land and put them in the city, and they had no skills for a new income. And it was backed by the state, right? It was government backed. And so to sort of take this trip up there and see this in my own state was really alarming to me. And while I will always support workers and their right to make a living, there has to be a better answer than this. And this is certainly a really good time to start having those hard conversations. Just real quick about why this is proceeding when it doesn't seem as if all of the legal pieces are in place. I don't quite understand. And so I think that's sort of a conversation and a question that many of us have that needs to kind of be addressed immediately.
Yay. See, like I said it before, I'll say it again. My incoming class is great. Mary, I know you think your incoming class was dynamic. My class won in a pandemic, and we are here ready to get things done. So I love that maybe if one thing we can do is that education piece. You know, I do believe that confused minds say no. You know, that people need all the information to make informed decisions. And if that's what we can do, is allow people to learn. Winona doesn't know this yet, and I'm going to spin it on her right now, but like there has been some behind the scenes conversations that more of us want to invite her into conversations. And, you know, we want to make decisions with our communities. I don't think that I stand alone in the fact that I don't want to make decisions for people. I want to make decisions with people and with our communities that matter. So thank you all, Repolex, for being here. We're going to hide you for a second. But don't go anywhere. And I want to keep Mary on, and then I want to bring Robert Pilot and Emma on quickly. I know we're getting to the end of the time, but I feel like this is just a really impactful show. But I want, Robert, if you can quickly talk to us about the education piece. I know that you started Native Roots Radio because of what was happening down in Standing Rock and the importance of sharing the entire message. Do you want to highlight just a little bit about, why you started Native Roots Radio, the benefits you saw in that, and how now we're transitioning your voice and your platform to talk about what's happening at Line 3?
Peeny Gigi for having me on. What a great show. We started Native Roots Radio. It was a funny story. I went to a factory farm kind of talk. My wife was tabling there, and Wendy, and AM 950 was right next to it. And it was right when Standing Rock was happening. And I think there was one national exposure and a little exposure happening in the Twin Cities. People were going to Standing Rock. So I would go there and I would hear misinformation. And so I asked them, I pitched the idea to have a radio show to amplify Native voices. And it'll be 3 years that I've been on. And this week, starting the beginning of the year, we're going to be on 5 days a week. And the education part is the whole thing, because you heard the legislators here talking. They have no idea about Native Americans. They don't have any idea. I was listening to one of the legislators talk about what was happening in Africa and other countries. That's what happened to us. We were put in cities just a generation ago and expected to fly. Our lines being taken away. So to amplify, I'm just a conduit of people like Winona, Mary Kunish, yourself, to what's happening in Indian countries. So I've been really proud to be able to amplify the voices, and it's really coming down to some important stuff. Not only are we going to be talking about Line 3, but we have Polymet, and we have treaties. We have many issues that need to be amplified by our leaders here. So I just say, Peeny Gigi, Heather, for all the work you're doing, and Mary Kunish, who's on Native Roots Radio every week too, along with Winona LaDuke, and amplifying the voice and really what's going on Turtle Island. Not what we hear are these 15-second blurbs about Line 3 on the news, but really what's happening and how it's impacting everybody. And we as Natives look 7 generations ahead, and it looks pretty bleak here if we can't stop things like this going through our backyard. There would have been no Native Roots Radio if the people in Bismarck would have let their pipeline go through their city, but the white people said, no, we want it to go through Standing Rock Reservation. And so, there's a lot of, what would happen if the pipeline was going through people's backyards in the Twin Cities here? There would be a different story. And it is a race thing, and I agree with Winona.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that's a whole other conversation, just about how, our spirituality and our beliefs and the way that we utilize Mother Earth for our spiritual well-being just gets overlooked a lot. Winona, if you want to quickly share the story about the lodge, talk about why we use the lodge, and that there was just a stake put in the middle of it with no consideration for the fact that this is a spiritual space for our people, and it's always been used in this capacity.
Yeah, I feel like that, we go in our lodges. I'm a member of our Medewin Society. We go in there to pray and just to be there. And, my lodge is open. Our lodge is open. You can see the sky, and that's a lot of different than how a lot of people think in their experience talk to God, right? A lot of times it's in a small space, and now we spend all our time looking at an iPhone or something. We don't even look up, but we don't even see the sky. So we're praying there, and we have our lodge there, and then one day we come back to our lodge, and there's a stake from the pipeline in the middle of the lodge, and I just thought, well, that's not really right. They didn't even know it was it was our lodge. They didn't recognize us. And, I feel like for 7 years, I've been trying to say, hey, we're here. Mm-hmm. Hey, this is where we pray. Hey, this is where we got the medicine. Hey, that's where the magical beings live. But, the state of Minnesota, they just want to have the world to think that it's their way. And you know what is we got to build if we're going to have a multiracial society and a multiracial democracy, my spiritual freedom or my religious freedom is as valid as anyone else's, you know? And how we think is our knowledge systems are as valid as the paradigm of the DNR, for crying out loud. You know, I just think that we need to change how things are done in Minnesota, and now is the time to do it. Tim's legacy doesn't want to be, you know, this is like the Trump's wall of Minnesota, an unnecessary infrastructure project that causes a lot of conflict. And what we want is infrastructure that fixes things in Minnesota, not makes more messes. That's what I think.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we, you know, that there's a respect for the partnership and the government to government relationship that we have with our tribes. You know, we're just seeing like all the stuff that's happening up in Red Lake now with the pipeline and them going through, you know, their tribal areas without any consultation. And so it is some of the things that we're asking questions about. And, you know, one of the things that I know Robert uses his platform for, and what I hope to use my platform for is, you know, is to educate and is to follow up and ask tough questions, you know, and try to get answers. It's one thing to ask a question and just kind of let it keep it moving. Like, you know, we have to work on getting answers, and we have to work on having the courage to step up and really ask these questions. Mary's done a really good job on that. Another whole area of this that we haven't touched on, and we won't touch on tonight, but we will in another show, is the murdered and missing Indigenous women movement and epidemic that's happening when it comes to man camps that people don't want to talk about. And the response is that, well, we don't have data for it. Well, like, newsflash, we haven't had a data for murdered and missing Indigenous women like ever, and that's a problem. And so Mary, do you real quick just want to touch on that, and then that can kind of lead us in. We'll have another conversation about that more specifically in January. But, you know, what are some concerns that you see just with that area?
Sure. So just to update folks, in 2019, we passed the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Task Force. We finished it. We completed it in less than 15 months on less than $150,000. And the report came out on the 15th. You can go to the Minnesota Public Safety Department of Safety website, just Google MMIW Minnesota report, and you'll be able to see the 164-page report I am so proud of passing legislation for. But one of the consistent issues that we found in studying this, and I call it a pandemic, because it isn't just a temporary issue, it's not just local issue, it is a global issue, missing and murdered women. And people are very concerned about bringing in all these men. Not to say that every man is going to be violent against women in the community, but it is proven that the violence and the murder and the rape and the abuse and the drug use and the alcohol use goes higher and higher and escalates when there are these camps of many men, especially in the extraction economy, where pipelines, mining, hunting, fishing, casinos, sporting events. We know that women become trafficked, and women are brought in to be trafficked in these areas. And this is a real concern for many people in the communities that these men are housed in. And I think it's a legitimate problem, and I think it's certainly one that we have to keep a really close eye on.
Yeah, we will talk about that more. That is something that
Absolutely.
I'm really passionate about, educating and understanding. So, Mary, do you want to mute yourself for a second, please? I think we're getting some feedback, but I want to wrap up with Emma quickly, because Emma's kind of moving into a capacity of really helping us get this message out. I know Robert mentioned that they're going 5 days a week, but when I talk to Emma behind the scenes about this, it's really merging a lot of her passion to do this work around getting this message out and really making sure that we play a valid role in creating knowledge and power for our next generation. So Emma, do you want to quickly just share a little bit, and then we'll wrap up the show from there?
Sure. Hi, bonjour everyone. My name is Ogama-Ganu-Ikwe, means Golden Eagle Woman in Ojibwe. I am an enrolled member at the Red Lake Nation in northern Minnesota. I first got involved with what is essentially making light and promoting what's happening in Minnesota when it comes to Enbridge about 7 years ago, when a family friend of ours, who I now call my uncle, informed my father about a pipeline that was placed by Enbridge in, I believe, the late 50s or early 60s on land that was actually ceded to the Red Lake Nation, and that pipeline was placed there without their permission. We had started a camp there, and we were able to keep it going for quite some time, but eventually, things fizzled out as the way that they did. But things like Standing Rock have gotten way more massive attention in the time since then. So what I'm hoping to see in Minnesota is this national attention that Standing Rock got, because this is a national issue. And I don't know that maybe people realize exactly how important Minnesota is when it comes to water, but we do carry the headwaters in the Mississippi River here. What we do in Minnesota affects everybody downriver. That is us from the Gulf, from here to the Gulf of Mexico. And the big things that I want to touch on from this conversation are what Athena said about the water fountains, that sometime when segregation was still a thing, people were arguing that there should be 2 water fountains because they maybe got paid more money because they installed those water fountains. We have to be shrewd in our decision making. And I am so proud to see so many Minnesota legislators come on here and be aware of those situations. And the other big part of this that I really want to touch on and just kind of echo as super important is that this is a Minnesota issue for all of Minnesota. And it's not in my backyard. As Minnesotans, we all talk to each other, and we treat each other like neighbors. We're known for being nice to one another. If you can go look at your neighbor and say, well, I don't want that in my backyard, but it's fine if you take that risk in yours, I think that we as a state really need to reassess our values. So I'm disappointed in Line 3 and what's happening with Line 3, not necessarily because of the legislators or even Governor Walz, but because my fellow Minnesotans have not stepped up to the plate and become part of this conversation, and many of them don't even yet know that this is happening. So I'm hoping to use my capacity with Native Roots Radio going forward to bring more attention to this issue and get more people involved and educated on what's really happening in Minnesota here.
Great. Thank you. Pilame, to everybody. Let's bring everybody back quick so that we can say one big thank you. I know, I'm hoping, Winona, you can see us, although we can't see you. But
I can. Y'all look
all
beautiful.
the hearts in the world for what you're doing and the work that you're doing. And I know that you made a comment the very first time that we were out there that, like, your age and what are you doing out there, that like we need to activate more people. And I think that a lot of people just want to know, what can we do? We know what we can do and we know what we want to do. But Winona, what is something that if this is the first time somebody's hearing about Line 3 and they feel engaged and they want to do something to the general public, what is, we'll put the website up, but what is something that Greater Minnesota, nationwide, Turtle Island can do to support this effort?
One, Governor, Walz, I mean, we need a way to just have a stay so that we can have our day in court, because these pipelines, when scrutinized by the courts, do not stand up. Not a single one has gone ahead. What we want is our day in court. So we want to stay. And more than that, we just want jobs that makes sense. You know, we want a real economy in Minnesota where we don't have to destroy the environment. We want a Green New Deal. We want a just transition. Let's make it. Let's roll up our sleeves and make something better. Make something better for all. But I just thank y'all. Look at our literature, and then keep coming up and go see the pipeline in Bacchus. Go see the pipeline over there, by Thief River Falls. Go take a look over by Plummer. It's all over our state. Be present for our state. Be present. Go see the Crow Wing, all of them. Thank you so much, though, miigwech. And follow us on honorearth.org and Stop Line 3.
Yes, all of that. Well, thank you everybody for being here. As always, I appreciate your passions. I appreciate your time. And I really believe that we make a change when we work together and we work collectively. So thank you all for being here. It was great seeing you. Tune in next week for Together with Heather. I'm really excited for our conversation next week. I think I'm really excited for all the conversations, but we're going to be talking about ICWA and foster care with our Indigenous babies. I am a licensed foster care mom. I really have a heart for that. And some of my very best friends in town do the same. And so we'll be talking about that. We'll be having some licensors on to talk about why it's important for our Indigenous kids to stay in Indigenous families and keep the culture and passion alive. So until next time, everybody, stay safe. Have a good holiday, but I know it's really, really hard, but have a safe holiday. There are some standards that are in place for a reason. We want to do our very, very best to protect our entire community so that we can come back strong and together. So we'll see you all next time. Bye.